Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Mr. Lee's Math Class Videos. I'm Mr. Lee. This is Math 1316 Trigonometry 5.2 Part 1 Video 2. So we'll finish 5.2 Part 1 in this video so we can talk about some of our quadrantal angles. Now, what is a quadrantal angle? We noticed on the circle in the previous video that we're either in the first, second, third, or fourth quadrant, except at four specific values, 0, 90, 180, and 270, because they're kind of on the boundaries between them. So those are what the quadrantal angles are. They're the actual x and y values at those 0, 90, 180, and 270, where you're not in one of the quadrants where you don't really know for sure. And the reason that this can cause a problem is that when you're dividing by x or dividing by y at those quadrantal angles, one of them is going to be 0, and we know in math that we're not supposed to divide by 0, which means some of our trig functions can be undefined at some of those points. If we look at the circle, if you're at 90 or 270, things that are dependent on x, along that line, x is 0, so those things will be undefined at 90 and 270, whereas at 0 and 180, things that depend on y is 0 there, so those things will be undefined, but only if you're dividing by them. So if we look at our functions originally, you'll notice that sine and cosecant, sine divides by r, and the radius will never be negative, so sine and cosine are defined everywhere, because you're never going to have a radius of 0, because the radius will always be going out from the center, and it's a length. It's really the question of tangent, cosecant, cotangent, and secant. You'll notice that tangent and secant divide by x, so where x is 0, they'll be undefined. Cosangent and cosecant divide by y, so where those ones are 0, they'll be undefined. And I have it separated down here in a chart. You'll notice that the ones that are undefined at 90 are also undefined at 270. Similarly, the ones defined at 0 are also defined at 180. You may also notice in this chart that because sine and cosecant are related to each other, anytime sine is 0, cosecant is undefined. Similarly, cosine and secant, anytime cosine is 0, secant is undefined. Similarly to cotangent and tangent. When tangent is 0, cotangent is undefined, or when tangent is undefined, it's because cotangent is 0. So they all pair together, 1, 0 with an undefined. Once you've gone through the circle, back to say 360, you're back at 0 again, so you just end up back in the exact same values at 0, and every 90 after that just follows this pattern and continues to repeat as you go around the circle over and over. So one of the ways that I get people to realize what's actually happening at the value is to convert it to some value between 0 and 360 by adding or subtracting 360. So in this case, for 630, if we subtract 360, you get 270 degrees. That means angle 630 and angle 270 are in the exact same place on the circle, which means their trig values, the triangle you would draw, is exactly the same. So these two share values. So if they want to find the 6 trig functions at that value, since 630 and 270 are the same, it will be exactly the values here. So we can say the sine of 630 degrees is equal to the sine of 270, which is -1. The cosine of 630 degrees is the same as the cosine of 270, which is 0, and so on and so forth. So we know that tangent of 630 degrees is undefined. The cotangent of 630 degrees is defined, it's 0. The secant of 630 degrees, undefined. And then finally the cosecant of 630 degrees, which goes with sine, also -1. So let's move that into the screen here real quick. You'll notice that if sine or cosine or tangent is 1 or -1, their reciprocals are the same, because if you flip that fraction, it will be the same number. So you'll also notice that on the chart, where sine is 1 or -1, its reciprocal is 1 or -1, similar for cosine. You don't see that with tangent and cotangent because they aren't 1 or -1 at the quadrantals, but there will be places later where that's true. So I want you to practice on -540. Notice I would add 360, that gives you -180, and add 360 again. to get to positive 180. So you'll notice that negative 100, 540 degrees, and 180 are the same place on the circle, so it will work similarly to what we did over here. And then in classic online homework strategy, they introduce something to you. They're like, yeah, now you're a master of it, so now you can run these equations. What I will tell you is that get used to possibly knowing these values. One thing that I will say is you can kind of draw a triangle for it, but it's kind of like a fake triangle. So what I like to do is that if I have a triangle that's going up, say at 90 degrees, I'm going to draw a triangle going straight up to 90 degrees where my height is 1 and my radius is 1. And technically it just means my width is 0. And then you could do your SOHCAHTOA accordingly. But if you memorize the values, that will also work. So for now, we can use the table, but we can also talk about how trig functions with exponents are evaluated. So if you see, say, cosine squared of 180 degrees, it's written like this, but it really means this. Cosine of 180 degrees, and then that value squared. This is what they do just so that you know that the squared is applying to cosine and not the number inside of cosine. That's how they notate it. But really, it means this, the cosine of 180 degrees squared. So when you are evaluating these, you're going to do the cosine of 180 degrees first and then square it and use your normal order of operations. So the tangent of 360 degrees, we know 360 is the same as 0. The tangent of 0 degrees, that's equal to the tangent of 0 degrees plus 4 times the sine of 180 degrees minus 5. And I'm going to write it like this, the cosine of 180 degrees squared, just so that it's more clear when we're doing it. And I like to convert them to between 0 and 360, or 0 and 360 not including 360, so that I know where I am. I know the tangent of 0 is 0. The sine of 180 is actually also 0. Whereas the cosine of 180 is negative 1. So this is 0 plus 4 times 0 is 0. Here, order of operations, negative 1 squared is 1. So we have 0 plus 0 minus 5, because 5 times 1 is 5, which is negative 5. Now, it's super important, like I said, that you memorize these things or figure out how you can figure them out by drawing a triangle. I will leave B for you to try. So that's really all there is for 5.2 part 1. Like I said, I will put up a set of notes showing all the solutions to the ones that I didn't do on the videos, but we'll still have 5.2 part 2 coming up in the next video.